Hey all, it is Alex back again from your home of the music deep dive, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different video. So I've mentioned before that I kind of want to get into more explicitly music related content on this channel because I think that's something that's obviously been a little bit lacking because I haven't gotten to the point in my research where I can really talk about music. And this weekend kind of afforded me a very easy, maybe an obnoxiously easy discussion point, and that is, of course, Record Store Day 2023. Now, I can't remember offhand, actually, if I participated in the 2022 Record Store Day. I believe I did in 21. I've been not necessarily like an every year type of thing, just financially it doesn't make the most sense. But this year I decided to go, and well, as you can see on my right side here, I have some finds to kind of talk about. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to try to keep this mostly unedited if I can. And yeah, let's get into it. So for context for people, I live in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, kind of in that general area. So there's quite a few options as far as record stores go, and I'm pretty familiar with most of them. I went to a total of 3 today. I went to Cadence Records, a mixture of a record store and a coffee shop down in St. Paul. I went to Cheapo Records. They're kind of a chain. They have 3 different locations in the Twin Cities. I went to the one that is in St. Paul near Snelling Avenue. And then I went to Agarda Records, which is on, I believe, the east side of Minneapolis. So I went to 3. One place that I did not frequent is probably my favorite record store in the Twin Cities, Electric Fetus. I figured at that point I had already spent enough money on the day. So and the other thing too is Electric Fetus's selection is so freaking good that it's hard to exercise self-restraint in that store especially, so I decided to hold off on that for now. But in any case, let's go ahead and get right into it. First off, I'm going to show you a couple of things that aren't records. I think, so in total I probably have, what would I say, like 20 records here to show off. And most of them are new. There's not very many used copies here. No CDs in this. But I did purchase a couple of books. So in addition to, I talked about Cadence Records being a combination record store coffee shop, Agarda Records actually has a small kind of book selection. It's not very massive. It's not a bookstore by any means, but it does have some new and some used books. So I did acquire a couple here. First off, I have this I'd never heard of, but I think this is going to be a very interesting read for my purposes. This is Squeeze This, A Cultural History of the Accordion by Marian Jacobson. A Cultural History of the Accordion in America, I should say. So I think this is going to be very interesting in talking about early American popular music. Because, yeah, the accordion was a very frequently used instrument in early American popular music. And then, as the kind of thesis statement of that book says, it kind of just falls off the radar. And now it's kind of seen as this little antique type of thing that just isn't as relevant anymore. So I think that'll be an interesting read. The second thing that I have to show is this book that came out, I think, a year or 2 ago. I'm going to check the copy right here. 2020. Paperback came out 2021. This is Sarah Smarsh's She Come By It Natural, Dolly Parton and the Women Who Lived Her Songs. This is, I've heard quite good things about this book, and kind of how it talks about, again, women in country music. Not the first book I've picked up kind of discussing that specific subject, so I'm really excited to, I guess, just kind of see what content there is inside of it. I had been considering picking it up for quite a while, but it's such a short book. It's like 170 pages. That I couldn't justify buying it for $25-$30 at Barnes & Noble. So found it a lot cheaper here, so I'm glad to have picked it up. All right, so now let's talk about the records. So I'm going to start with the cadence selection first. There's about, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 records here, it looks like. We'll start with the used copies first. I don't have very strong personal sentiments towards any of these albums, but it's kind of nice to have. This is actually the first Jan and Dean album I've ever bought. So this is, angle that here, Jan and Dean, The Little Old Lady from Pasadena from 64, if memory serves. It contains the title song, which is one of their most famous hits, and a bunch of other songs, some of them co-written by Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. It also contains one of the most elaborate song titles I've ever heard, the Anaheim, Azusa, and Cucamonga Sewing Circle Book Review and Timing Association, which in fact was a charting single, I might add. I don't remember how high it got, but it's a nice enough album. I mean, Jan and Dean were not an albums act by any means, and there's definitely filler, there's Beach Boys cover songs and things like that, as they were kind of trying to hop on that wave back in the mid-60s, but it's nice enough, and that might be their most famous like album just across the board, so it's nice to own it. And then I have a couple of really good condition, actually, Elvis soundtrack albums, so I kind of showed it here. This is Clambake. Never seen the film. I've never seen a single Elvis Presley film, at least not at this moment. And I recall not thinking this was one of his better soundtracks, which is not saying much. Elvis soundtracks, generally speaking, are fairly mediocre quality-wise, but still, it's nice to have. These are both $5. And if you see an Elvis soundtrack anywhere, like for the most part, you're going to find it for like $10 at minimum. And if it's any less than that, then it's probably in pretty bad condition. But these are both in excellent condition. And again, just $5 a piece. This soundtrack, though, is quite good. Might be his best soundtrack overall. This is King Creole, which contains, among others, the song Trouble, which is, it's not one of my favorite Elvis songs per se, but it's one of my favorite vocals of his, I think. He just goes really hard into it, more so than he really needs to, if I'm being honest. So really nice to have both of them. I think I only own like 2 other Elvis records. I still have yet to get like his debut from Elvis in Memphis. I do own Elvis Country, which low key might be his best record, but nice to have those soundtracks here. So one thing I do also just kind of want to mention right off the bat, before I get too far into it, I'm going to be doing, eventually I want to do videos kind of about my entire vinyl collection, my entire CD collection and things like that. Just so that people can get an overview. But one thing I think people are potentially going to give me shit for, which is fair enough for sure, is that, well, your collection doesn't have enough of this, or it has a lot of this, this, that, and the other thing. Not the most diverse collection ever per se. I do my best. I try to diversify my taste, and that's part of why I'm doing this whole kind of music deep dive project, is to really get into it. But I have to be honest about where I'm coming from, so it's going to be a lot of kind of standard picks. There isn't too much that I think is going to be like out of the ordinary left field choices, so just bear with me. But I continuously try to expand my taste as best I can. So, and I think there's some interesting choices here, such as this one. Though I think this one is for not necessarily because it's like, oh, this is left field album, but because I think people are going to be surprised that I actually bought the damn thing. I think this says it all. Phil Collins, Both Sides. This is one of the worst Phil Collins solo albums. And this is coming from someone who thinks that like things like Face Value and especially No Jacket Required are amazing pop albums. Both Sides is not anywhere close to either of those things. The reason I got it was because I'll show you again just in case you didn't catch it, but that cover right there is actually the reissue cover from 2015. And the 2015 reissues of his post 80s albums are pretty hard to find. If you're looking for like a copy of Dance into the Light or Testify especially, I mean, you're probably paying 3 figures for it. And both sides, I want to say that one's kind of hard to find too, but this was only $17, so I do want to get complete on Collins at some point. So I figured this would be a good first step to getting to that place. But no, it is not a very good album. But this one is, and this one is quite cheap as far as Tom Waits albums go. This is Blood Money, the record that was released in tandem with Alice in 2002. Yeah, I got this one. I don't have Alice yet. I have about 5 Tom Waits albums at this point. Alice is definitely better, but Blood Money is quite a strong album just in its own right. And I'm pleased to have it. We'll talk about it more. Tom Waits is actually responsible for what I believe is the rarest record in my collection, just in general. But yeah, I have several of his kind of later period stuff, because that's where I'm drawn to with Waits, is his kind of Swordfish Trombones on is the most interesting phase of Waits in my view. Not that his jazz stuff is bad or mediocre or anywhere close to it, but I think the 80s, 90s, and 2000s stuff compels me a little bit more. Radiohead. I'm going off the top of my head here. I don't remember if I have a Radiohead album. I might have OK Computer on vinyl. But in any case, this is In Rainbows. I don't really need to talk about it as far as what the actual contents of the album are. It was a game changer. If not necessarily musically, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's still one of their best records. But if it wasn't a game changer musically, the kind of the release period, the release cycle promotion for this album was enormous and marked a major sea change in the music industry, kind of switching to the digital aspect of things. But yeah, In Rainbows is probably my second or third favorite Radiohead album, and there are probably certain days where it would be number one. I think the production and the songwriting there is some of their most diverse overall. So really happy to own that finally. And then the last record from Cadence that I'm going to talk about is Phoebe Bridgers' Stranger in the Alps, her debut album from 2017. It's a great album. I already owned Punisher, as well as the Boy Genius debut EP. I don't own the record yet because I haven't heard the record yet. But Stranger in the Alps, it's a phenomenal album, and it's grown on me more with different listens. Do I prefer it to Punisher? I don't think so. I think Punisher benefits from being a bit more of a diverse record, and I think the songwriting has progressed, but there's no doubt that Stranger in the Alps, you feel the Elliott Smith influence a little bit more vividly on that one. And yeah, I have no complaints. Fantastic album. Probably, if I had to give it a star rating, probably a 4 or a 4.5. But yeah, that is everything that I got from Cadence. So now let's talk about cheapo records. I got 3 records from this place. 2 of these were actually on clearance, which I think is very interesting. So the first one is David Bowie, The Next Day Extra EP. This is actually, it's advertised as a record store day release. It was a record store day release from last year. I don't believe I got anything RSD 2023 specific, but this is one from last year. It is essentially some extra outtakes and a few remixes from the Next Day album, which is a strong record. It's one that I need to sit down with more, because to me Black Star has always kind of overshadowed it. But the Next Day it has some really strong songwriting, and it definitely feels like a less self-consciously aging record than maybe like something like Heathen is. Kind of felt like, I mean, he touches on maturity and aging somewhat in the album, but as I recall, it was a bit more kind of jubilant than anything else. So really happy to own that. This next record I actually haven't heard. I've only heard the title track of this one because it was the lead single, but I have Prince's Welcome to America. This is the Vault album from 2 years ago. This was recorded back in, off the top of my head, I think 2010, around that time. And it's not surprising they chose to release this around the time that they did. They kind of marketed it as like the Prince posthumous response to like the George Floyd protests and things like that. So yeah, my Prince collection is kind of, as we'll talk about when I start doing videos on the vinyl collection, it's coming along. I have, I think, a pretty eclectic group of albums. So I have obviously some of the popular ones like Purple Rain, Sign of the Times, etc. And then I have some just random ones like, I mean, this now, but like I have Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic, and The Rainbow Children, which I advocate for as being one of Prince's very best albums, musically especially. So yeah, I'm happy to own this one and happy to add it to the collection, but I do need to give it a listen sometime. And then the last one is my first record by The National on vinyl. This is 2017's Sleep Well Beast. I don't know if this is my favorite National album. It's top 2, top 3, but there's probably a couple of their earlier ones that I prefer to it. But again, I didn't own another album of theirs before this, and this is actually the first one that I heard, because I think it was the first one they released when I was like starting to really get interested in following music and new releases and things like that. And I remember people in some of the communities that I frequented were just gushing over this thing. So I listened to it and I really liked it, and I've always had kind of a soft spot for it. Is it dark and moody? Yes. Is it a little bit of a dirge sometimes? Yes. But I don't mind it when the National kind of gets into that space. I think it works pretty effectively. And I think it's fantastic. So it's one that holds a special place in my heart as far as my own musical development. So really happy to have that in the collection. All right. So I look at my next stack here. This is the stack from Agartha Records in Minneapolis. There's about, probably about 10 records here to talk about. And I'm going to start with a couple of ones that surround one of our local boys here, not Minnesota born and raised, but Justin Vernon from Bon Iver. I actually just recorded a video on Bon Iver for another YouTube channel, which is going to come out at some point down the line. So I will plug that when it does. But in the meantime, Bon Iver I was almost complete on vinyl-wise, and now I am again on the cusp of being complete after getting these. This is actually the lead single, the vinyl release of the lead single from 22 A Million. The A side is 22 Over Soon, the B side is 10 Death Breast, both of these kind of extended remixes. Both great songs, as you can see behind me. I like try to get out of the way here. A lot of glare because of the window, but 22 A Million is framed behind me on the wall here. Very important album, as I discussed in my musical releases that are important to me video. So happy to have that physical single. And then this one I had procrastinated on getting on vinyl, so finally got to it. 2019's I, it is my least favorite Bon Iver album, but my least favorite Bon Iver album is still head and shoulders above a lot of people's best. It's really strong. I think a rejuvenating type of album after a lot of kind of melancholy in his previous releases. This one is a lot more optimistic and kind of looking at the big picture. And yeah, quite a bit to like. So glad to own it on vinyl. And then this one I need to revisit because I haven't in a while. but this is the self-titled debut album from Big Red Machine. Justin Vernon and Aaron Dessner from The National collaborating on this one. This one's quite good. I have not heard their most recent album yet. I'm behind on that one, but I think I remember being disappointed when I heard Big Red Machine at first, but I think that's because I was applying, like, again, these expectations, like it's going to be Bon Iver level quality, it's going to be National level quality, and it's not. It's definitely kind of its own thing. And now, of course, Big Red Machine has even more kind of sort of cultural context, holds a little bit more importance because of its connection to Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift appeared on the newest Big Red Machine album. And kind of, it's interesting to see all these worlds kind of combine. But yeah, Big Red Machine, solid project. Okay, Tears for Fears. This is the tipping point. This is their most recent album from last year. It is their worst album, if I have to be blunt. But I got it because it's still decent enough. There's definite highlights. The title track, Break the Man, My Demons. Tears for Fears are an interesting band where I think people really fixate on songs from The Big Chair, and it is their best album, there's no doubt about it, but there's a lot of other interesting things there too. I think the two albums that Orzabal did as a solo, essentially a solo act, are both have value in their own ways. Their reunion album in '04, Everybody Loves a Happy Ending, is quite good. This one is sort of self-consciously dark, just because of the events that preceded it. Roland Orzabal lost his wife very suddenly, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess. But there are highlights there, and I did find this one for cheaper than where it's normally sold at, so decided to jump on it. This is Vashti Bunyan's Just Another Diamond Day from 1971. A little bit kind of creased already, it seems like, but this is a really pretty folk album from the early 70s. Something about it is, I don't like using the word pastoral. It's such a cliched way of describing it, but that's how it feels. It's much more, I mean, Vashti Bunyan is, I believe, an American artist, if memory serves, but it sounds very traditional, very English, and kind of sets her apart from the other folk of the early 70s, because everything else is obviously very connected to like the California sound and stuff, or English folk. You're thinking of like I don't know, Bert Jansch is kind of a bad example, but there is that connection there a little bit. But Vashti Bunyan kind of stands on her own. This album kind of stands on its own. I haven't heard anything she's done after that. I know she's released, I think, one or two other albums in the 2000s, but this release is fantastic. So glad to own it on vinyl finally. This is another one that I remember listening to in 2017. This is Always, Anti-Socialites, their second album. This one has grown on me as well. I really like In Undertow is a fantastic song, but I remember thinking a lot of it kind of blended together at the time, but it has definitely grown on me. I have fond memories of listening to it again, kind of in that sophomore year of college time. Have yet to hear Blue Rev from last year, which I think a lot of people think is their best album. So I need to get on that, but I'm glad to add Anti-Socialites to the collection. Apparently that is a yellow splatter vinyl. I'm not someone who really pays that much attention to the color of vinyl records, but it's kind of cool to have that. Hozier, self-titled record from 2013, I believe. It's kind of funny because Hozier, so a few months back, I ordered off of Amazon Hozier's self-titled album and then another one, I believe it was Paul McCartney's Flaming Pie. And normally I've had fine luck with Amazon shipping orders. And in this case, I got to my house at the time. Flaming Pie came and was totally fine. But instead of Hozier self-titled, I actually got Tyler the Creator's Flower Boy, which is a very strange mistake to make. It was in fine condition, and I think Flower Boy is a fantastic album, so it's not like I was upset. But at the same time, it's like I wanted Hozier, so I've kept my eye out for a while now and decided to finally just go ahead and get it this time. People need to give that album more credit, I think. It is... I was recently watching Mark Grondin from Spectrum Pulse, his review of the album, and kind of him talking about the lyricism and how grimy and how darkly sexual it is. And yeah, I think it's a very unique style of writing, and I think people give Hozier a hard time because of his fan base a little bit. But I think if you look into the lyrics, and you kind of you look past the fact that his fan base is kind of, I don't know, stereotypical kind of white girls who really like indie folk, that type of thing. But there's a lot of value here in what he's doing, and I think he really touches on something. There's a lot of just sharp songwriting on that album, so I think it's aged very well compared to a lot of other pop rock music from the early 2010s. Purple Mountains, self-titled album, their first and presumably their last album. I actually haven't heard any Silver Jews stuff yet, so I need to get on that, but this is a very, it's a melancholy, dark album from David Berman, and I think I've looked into it before because, again, the story of it and how, it was created, and then I think it was, a month after it was released that Berman committed suicide. I think it would be interesting to kind of, for people who knew Berman to kind of speak out a little bit about kind of the lead up to this. Like, was this a self-conscious kind of goodbye to the world, or was Berman in a position where he was really committed to doing things after the band left? I know there was a whole tour planned. I get that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't planning for this to be a goodbye of some sort. It's certainly it's some of the darkest and most just explicitly like final lyrics I think I've heard in any type of an album. It's on the level of like a, Leonard Cohen, You Want It Darker, We Kill the Flame type of vibe. So it's phenomenal album, phenomenal songwriting. And like I said, Silver Jews are on the list for sure. Speaking of people who are dead, I'm sorry. The last one that I have to show, Elliott Smith, New Moon. This is the one Elliott Smith album that I did not have on vinyl. I guess it's debatable if you want to call this a proper studio album. Some people do, some people don't. I would say that it is an archival release, collection of outtakes, mostly from kind of the Either Or sessions. And yeah, it's good. It's very good. I think as a whole album, it doesn't compare to any of the proper studio releases for obvious reasons. But I think that there's a lot of value to having it. I think some of the songs, like the one that jumps to mind is Whatever, song in C. I think I don't know if it's among his best songwriting per se, but there's still some gems that absolutely would have worked perfectly on full-fledged records. And I think I'm pleased to have it. I'm pleased to complete that collection. That's actually a collection that's surprisingly hard to find, to kind of finalize. He has one or two albums that are a pain in the ass to find. Figure Eight, I think, is the hardest. You might have to be paying like $50, $60 to get that one. But I'm complete on Elliott now. It's really satisfying. And I did want to end on that because he's one of my favorites. I don't think I talked about him in my previous video about artists and releases that have made a big impact on me. but he is absolutely near the top of the list. And yeah, it's just satisfying to complete that collection. Not the only major collection I've completed recently. I mean, I just talked about Bon Iver kind of being completed. I still need the Blood Bank EP to be official with that. I just completed my Beatles collection by finally giving in and buying Yellow Submarine on vinyl. So a lot of changes, a lot of additions to the collection. And yeah, there is something just oh so satisfying about having it, about just completing something in general. And so that is it. That is my record haul, if you will. My record store day haul from 2023. Quite a few interesting releases here. A lot of things that I've been looking at adding to my collection for years, but haven't until now, I suppose. So really grateful. Again, I will be doing videos on my vinyl and CD collections at some point because, number one, to be blunt, it's easy content. It's easy content to make, but I think it also gives people a sense of what my foundation is, my musical interests. And again, like I was saying, probably very ineloquently before, my goal is to diversify my tastes. I feel like I've made strides in that department recently, but I do not pretend to be the most kind of musically knowledgeable person out there or the person who has the widest range of tastes. I'm trying to constantly expand. It's a work in progress, and that's why we're doing this project, because I want to put in the work for myself so that I can help others kind of be enlightened, as I hopefully will be during this. I don't know. I'm rambling, but in any case, probably more videos on physical musical media to come. So, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews, more videos are to come. Tell a friend as well. Appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive. Later.